Hello, this is Angelia, and you are listening to or watching the podcast Why You Do What You Do, the podcast that talks about human development and psychology to try and help you figure out maybe a little bit more about why you do what you do. And last time we were talking about risk factors for drug abuse, and we're going to take up on gateway drugs. And hopefully this thing works right. We were having a little technical difficulties a while ago. Alcohol, marijuana, and tobacco, the three drugs most popular with adolescents, are sometimes called gateway drugs because their use may lead to use of more addictive substances such as cocaine and heroin. And now people argue that that's probably not true, but for some people it is, especially if they have an addictive personality. Most kids drink alcohol. Some people have smoked pot. I've twice, shared a joint with some people, and it was theirs, not mine. I tried smoking, but I didn't like it. It made me cough, so I didn't do it. Teenagers try these things, trying to fit in with the peers, peer pressure, and they can lead to harder things. So talk to your kids about this and tell them these can lead to more, especially if, addiction runs in your family, and they can become a serious problem. Young people who smoke, drink, or use marijuana often associate with peers who introduce them to harder drugs as they grow older. And sometimes these people are, people who sell these things. So, if they can get a young kid hooked on them, then they can sell it to them later on. So they have motives that aren't exactly just for fun. Marijuana not only tends to lead to hard drug use, but can be harmful in itself. Long-term heavy use can impact memory and attention, and there's been studies to show that. They're citing some here. But now it also does have some healing properties. It's used for glaucoma. It's used in cancer patients to help them. So if you're using a drug like that has some mind-altering effects, but also some healing properties, there's a trade-off there, and you have to decide whether it's, worth it or not to you. If you're in stage 4 cancer, it might be worth it to you. You're not so worried about your memory and, things like that. Frequency of alcohol and tobacco use is high in many industrial countries and is starting earlier than in the past. And that's because our children, the nuclear family doesn't really exist anymore. And mama's not home as soon as the kids get home. So these kids are, latchkey kids or, running the neighborhood kids. And they're exposed to these things at an earlier age than they were in the past. However, cigarette smoking has declined among U.S. adolescents since 1996, and that's probably partly because of, the commercials with the whole lung cancer and cancer people, talking about it, don't smoke, and you can see what happened to them, and, when you can see real things like that, that makes an impact. Kids are getting a little bit smarter about that, thankfully, because, I know when I was growing up in the 70s and, early 80s, so people were not so smart about such things. An important early influence may be the omnipresence of substance use in the media. And there's still, movies where they show people doing drugs and, shows and, kids want to fit in, they want to look cool, or popular, and if this is what the people they consider to be cool are doing, then they're more likely to do it. According to one study, alcohol, tobacco, or illicit drugs are shown in 70% of primetime network television dramas. And now that's dramas. If you think about the dramas, like FBI, NCIS, CSI, things like that, then yes, there are a lot of drug related shows where there are drugs involved. 38 out of 40 top grossing movies. So the top movies, most of them got something to do with, some drugs or alcohol or things like that, smoking and things. and half of all music videos. Because if you think about the popular music videos, we're always talking about, people who are drinking and, things like that. Like one of the most popular songs back in the day, a little while ago, was about, popping bottles, and the hot tub thing. So, kids are hearing this and they're getting the message that cool people do this. So if I want to be cool, then I'll do this too. And you got to explain to them that's not cool, that's stupid. They might think they're cool, other people might think they're cool, but really they're stupid. So you can tell them that. Authoritative parenting can help young people internalize standards that may insulate them against negative peer influences. Like I said, talk to them, tell them things, explain it to them. Because if you talk to the kid like he's a human being and a person, he understands that you respect him and you're trying to do what's best for him. It's not just because you said so. It's not about that. It's not about the control. It's about you give a crap about them and you want them to make good decisions for themselves. Among 500 9th through 11th graders, students whose close friends were drug users were less likely to report increased drug use if they saw their parents as highly authoritative. Meaning, if even though their friends were doing it, or their parents were explaining to them that's stupid, you're going to screw up your life, screw up your brain, your lungs, whatever, they're more likely to, not be as into it as the friends because the parents are giving a crap about them. Whereas the friends who are doing this, parents are probably not caring or are so authoritarian, the kids are just doing this to rebel and feel like they have some control over their life. Contrary to popular impression, adolescents do seem to care what parents think. And I can tell you, yes, they do. And that is a good time for you to step up the involvement and be authoritative, to talk to them like they're human beings, because they are, and let them know you care about them and you want them to make wise decisions for themselves. Rational discussions with parents can counteract harmful media influences and discourage or limit drinking. Because, again, alcoholism runs in our family, so that's something I told my kids. Don't drink to get drunk. If you start getting drunk, you might start liking it. You might become addicted to alcohol. And then you're going to end up like two of our uncles and one of our cousins. So that's the cautionary tale there. Don't do this because you have the potential to become an alcoholic and die from it. So again, it ain't all about me and it's because I want to and I'm the boss. No, I care about you and I want you to know this can happen to you, so I don't want you to do it. And that's the way you need to teach your kids. Depression. It is not surprising that Anne Frank took an antidepressant in view of the desperate situation in which she found herself. Because, think about it. They're out there rounding out people of your group, and they are killing people. So, she was in a situation where she knew if they got caught, she could die. And unfortunately, she did. But, so under that situation, I don't think it's a surprise at all that anybody would need some antidepressants. But even in normal surroundings, the prevalence of depression increases during adolescence. Now, I did not have depression during adolescence. I had it in childhood, pre-adolescence. My adolescence was actually great because I had great friends in high school and a super sweet boyfriend, and I had a great adolescence. It wasn't until later on when I was an adult that things were not looking so great, and then my husband developed a mental illness that kind of devastated our family and changed him into a whole different person than he was to begin with. So my life was falling apart, and then my mother passed away, and so there for about 6 months I was severely depressed. I made a plan to kill myself. So I ended up on antidepressants and anti-anxiety meds. So there's no shame in it. If you get that depressed, go talk to somebody. Get some help. There are drugs that can help you feel better until you level out and come off of that. Like I said, I was on these things for about 6 months. And then I felt better, and the doctor said, okay, you can try and go off of them, see what happens. And I did, because it was a situation, and not a chemical, imbalance in the brain that was causing my depression and anxiety. As many as 2.5% of children and 8.3% of adolescents have major depression at any given time. So, that's, you might think a small amount of people, but that's what was reported here. How many people are out there that we know have depression and anxiety and it goes undiagnosed because they won't go talk to anybody about it, or that would never tell anybody if they did. So that small number, I'm thinking, is probably a lot bigger, closer to maybe 50% or more. So, there's no shame in it. If you have a problem, like I said, you think your kid's possessed, you take them to a priest. If they're sick, you take them to a doctor. So if they're having some mental problems, go get some help. There's no shame in it, Adolescent girls, especially early maturing girls, like adult women, are especially subject to depression. And that's because girls are getting bad messages from society. You have to be perfect. You have to be 36, 24, 36. You have to look a certain way. Your facial features should be symmetrical. Your nose shouldn't be too big. Your lips shouldn't be too big. Your eyes should be big. We're getting all these messages, and we're not fitting it because none of us are perfect. And like I said, even them chicks in the magazine are faked. They're being altered and photoshopped, and so talk to the girls and explain this to them so they don't think they're imperfect, because I think that's terrible. I heard a young girl saying, well, I don't know, but it's like, girl, you're gorgeous, you're beautiful. These messages you're getting are wrong. They're fake, they're not real. And adult women also, as we age, we gain weight. That's just a natural fact. Our bones get thicker, so we get thicker. If you're still wearing the same size you did in high school, that tells me you probably ain't eating enough. Right there. Because your bones even get thicker. So you shouldn't even be able to squeeze into them pants you had in high school, because your hips should have gotten thicker and widened out, especially if you had some kids. We need to teach the girls that you're going to keep growing as you get older. Your hips are going to spread, especially in your childbearing years. And then if you have kids, it's going to spread even more. Your feet are going to get bigger. Your hands are everything's going to get bigger. It's just a fact of life. Because, society puts such a premium on that, and we don't explain that to them. And then they grow up thinking, I'm just this fat, horrible looking thing. And you're not. You're just probably a normal person. This gender difference may be related to biological changes connected with puberty or the way girls are socialized. Like I just said, it's the socialization. They're treated like, you have to look perfect. And there are some girls who are not super thrilled about going into puberty. They don't want to look like a woman. And I was a little bit like that. I was a tomboy anyway, because I like to play sports and everything. And, as things start changing, I was told by my parents, you can't go out and play with the boys anymore. You can't go out and play like that. You need to look like a girl. Once I got 13, 12, 13, I was told I need to dress like a girl. I need to look like a girl. I couldn't go out and play with the boys anymore unless there were other girls around, or took my brother or sister with me, because things happen. And of course they do. But, I wasn't super thrilled about being a girl. There were limitations. And their greater vulnerability to stress in social relationships. Because we want people to like us. We're raised to be people pleasers, and in our own brain chemistry, we would rather talk. We're geared to be, peacemakers more so than boys are. And oh my, we want to be friendly and make friends with other people in general. Now, as society moves on, there are more men whose brains are more like women's, more women's whose brains are more like men's. And, people are saying it's the chemicals in the food, but, we don't really know. But we know the human race is evolving and changing to where the difference between the sexes is not as great as it used to be in our parents' and grandparents' day. Body image and eating disturbances can aggravate depressive symptoms. Because, like I said, if you don't feel good about yourself and you're having that anyway, then that's just going to make your depression worse. Not every death in adolescence is as poignant as Anne Frank's. Still, death this early in life is always tragic. Now, I had a sister who died when she was 12 years old. And it was pretty horrific for all of us, especially my mother. But, you don't expect young people to die. They're young. You expect old people to die because they're old and you get old and you die. But you don't expect young people to die. It's a big shock when a young person dies. So it is more tragic than if an old person dies because, like I say, they've lived their life. You expect them to die someday because they're old. I expect when I'm old, I'm going to die. But you don't expect young people to die. So it's a lot more tragic when a young person dies. And unlike Anne's, usually accidental. So the deaths are usually accidental when a young person does die. And that's what happened to her. She was hit by a car on her bike. And, she died from the injuries later on, about 2 weeks after that. So, it was pretty bad. We did get to say goodbye, and I'm thankful we got to say goodbye. But, we had to watch her waste away for those 2 weeks, going from being aware of what was going on to being out of her mind and then being just catatonic and in a coma. So, it was hard, and like I said, young people aren't supposed to die before old people, and it's always a shock when that happens. The frequency of crashes, handgun deaths, and suicide in this age group reflects a violent culture, as well as adolescents' inexperience and immaturity, which often lead to risk-taking and carelessness. So, accidental deaths are the most common. And talk to your kids. If they're going to be in a car, talk to them about how they need to be behaving and driving and how to not get in the car with people who have been drinking or doing drugs. I told my kids once they were old enough, call me. Don't get in a car with somebody, or two of my kids had started working. I said, get you an Uber, or give me my number. I'll pay for it, whatever. But, don't make dumb decisions that will cost you your life. Deaths from vehicle accidents and firearms. Motor vehicle collisions are the leading cause of death among U.S. teenagers. They account for more than 1/3 of all deaths of 15 to 19-year-olds. So that is the number one cause of deaths for our teenagers. So like I said, you need to talk to them, tell them don't get in a car with somebody who's impaired. When you're in the car, you need to be driving. It don't matter what's going on around you. You don't look over and talk to your friend while you're not looking at the road. You don't look in the rearview mirror and talk to the person in the backseat while you're not looking at the road. You need to be responsible and drive like a responsible person. And even then, stuff happens, Drunk drivers come across the road, and have hit carloads of kids before. So, excuse me. Here in Kentucky, we have the Carrollton bus crash site where a drunk man came across and hit a busload of kids, and took a lot of lives that day. And that was just terrible. And it was, there was no need for it. So, talk to your kids about these things. Collisions are more likely to be fatal when a 16 or 17-year-old driver carries passengers. Perhaps because adolescents tend to drive more recklessly in the presence of peers, because they're not trying to impress the parents, or they're thinking they're cool. I can drive, too fast, or take the turns wide and all this stuff and look cool for my friends. Well, you need to explain to them, no, you don't do that, because you're not going to look so cool when you're laying on a slab in the morgue, are you? Death rates for this age group have dropped 26% in the past 20 years, largely because of decreases in alcohol-related motor vehicle accidents. So the kids are getting smarter about drinking and driving, In my day, in the 80s, we had that big deal, don't drink and drive. In the 90s, too, I think it was still going on TV, don't drink and drive. And, showed the motor vehicle accidents. And, it's an important thing to talk to your kids about, because if you love your kids, you don't want to see them, on the side of the road while you have to claim their body. That's not how you want them to end up. So, if you're one of the cool parents who don't like to preach to your kids, you're not so cool, because, if you did love your kids, the cool thing to do would be to say, hey, I love you and I don't want you to end up dead from drinking and driving, so don't do it. Some states have adopted graduated licensing systems, and ours has. My two younger sons had that, which allow beginning drivers to drive only with supervision at first, then lift the restrictions gradually. And my younger son had a problem with that. He got his license, but they didn't put the sticker. The sticker came off, and they made him go back and get a whole new license with the sticker, only to then get the next license, a few months later when he turned 18. So the system's not perfect. Firearm-related deaths of 15 to 19-year-olds, including homicide, suicide, and accidental deaths, are far more common in the United States than in other industrialized countries, comprising about 1/3 of all injury deaths and more than 85% of all homicides. So, guns are a problem here in America. And so if you have firearms in the house, number one, if they're little people, you need to keep them up out of reach. For preteens and everything, keep the gun lock on there, or put them in a lock cabinet. For older kids, talk to them about it, keep safety on, say you don't touch it. There's no reason you should have to touch it. And of course, kids think of all kinds of things like, what if someone breaks in, blah, blah, blah. Okay, what if that happens? Then, okay, maybe. But I don't want you touching it otherwise, because, accidents happen. And we hear about it every day. I mean, there was one, a few years ago where a 3-year-old shot a 4-year-old. And of course, they didn't know what they were doing. They just found this thing, pointed it, and pulled the trigger, But that doesn't make that 4-year-old any less dead, So you got to be responsible with your firearms, because that's where they get them most of the time, Little kids aren't out, 3 and 4-year-olds aren't buying guns on the street. They're getting them out of home. Guns are the number one killer of African American youth. And that's true. They're using against each other. There's gangs. There's, beef between people where, one's messing with the other one's girl or whatever. And that's their quick and easy way of eliminating the competition. The chief reason for these grim statistics seems to be the ease of obtaining a gun in the United States. And it's still pretty easy. My son bought a gun a while back from an auction. He did have to fill out a paperwork, but he still just bought it. He didn't have to go in, any waiting period, blah, blah, blah. Just bought the gun. So, and there are people who will sell you a gun. There are people who give you a gun. So, yeah, it's still too easy in the United States for our kids to get hold of a gun. This is evident from the fact that youth death rates from firearms have declined since 1993, a period during which police have been confiscating guns on the streets and fewer younger people carry them. So, once they got that policy where, yes, they could take your gun, that has decreased the number. And the police destroy X amount of guns, and they'll say it on the news whenever this happens usually. every year. And it's usually a large number. And you're like, good gosh, that many guns were running around our community? That's crazy. So it's just a little scary. For many adolescents, the easiest place to get a gun is at home. So like I said, if you've got the gun at home, you need to teach them how to be responsible and not be playing with that. Contrary to the claims of gun rights defenders, guns in the home are 43 times more likely to kill a family member or acquaintance than to be used in self-defense. So, it's more likely that that kid is going to kill someone that they know than to actually use that in some self-defense. Suicide. Ready availability of guns in the home also is a major factor in teenage suicide, which increased by 11% among 15 to 19-year-olds and more than doubled among 10 to 14-year-olds between 1980 and 1997. So if there's a gun in the home, the child is more likely to commit suicide using said gun. So again, keep them locked up, keep them out of reach, so that this is not something that can happen in your home. Although most young people who attempt suicide do it by taking pills or ingesting other substances, those who succeed are most likely to use or carry firearms. So, whereas the taking of some pills or, other things might not always be successful, the gun usually is successful. Firearms are used in 67% of completed suicides. So that's over half. Thus, limiting access to firearms might well reduce the suicide rate, which is currently about 8 suicides per 100,000 15 to 19-year-olds, making suicide the third leading cause of death in this age group. So, that's pretty sad. If you think about all the causes of death amongst people, for teenagers, the third leading cause is suicide. And that tells you depression is very real amongst our young people. So you need to talk to them and deal with that. It's not something you're going to just say, get over it or whatever. There are things that, you can do. You can get them some help if they need it. There's no shame in it. It's better than having your child take their own life. Boys this age are 6 times as likely as girls to take their lives. Although suicide affects all ethnic groups. So the boys, don't just worry about your girls. The boys can have problems too. And they're more likely to finish the job. Native American boys have the highest rates and African American girls the lowest. So, I'm sure our Native American folks, if anyone's out there listening, you already know this. There's a lot of depression amongst the community, especially if you're on a reservation or in a village. And, talk to your young people. You got your own life, you got stuff going on, but you can be there for them and talk to them. And just because, African girls are the least likely doesn't mean they won't. So, again, talk to them, make sure you're in touch with your kids, touch base with your kids every day. Because you never know what's going on inside their mind unless you ask. Homosexual and bisexual youths who have high rates of depression also have high rates of suicide and attempted suicide. And that's because of the social stigma. And, you need to talk to them. And if they tell you this, I'm not even going to get to people's societal issues. But you should be there for your child, no matter what your child's going through, and no matter what aspect of their personality they're having trouble with at that point in time. If you still love your child, you should be able to discuss this with them or get them some counseling or therapy from someone who does have experience with these issues, because that's your job as their parent. What can be done to stem the alarming rise in suicide among young people? Many people intent on killing themselves keep their plans secret, but others send out signals well in advance. So, like I say, there are the people who usually succeed in killing themselves don't give any warning. They just decide to do it and they do it. But there are kids who will give warnings, who will leave notes and things like that. And this is a big cry for help. So you need to listen, when this happens. An attempt at suicide is sometimes a call for help. And some people die because they are more successful than they intended to be. So there are people who, this is a cry for help. They didn't really intend to actually kill themselves, but they're saying, I don't know what else to do. It's come to this point where I'm just thinking about not being here. I just want this all to end, and so I'm going to do this thing. And then, like I say, sometimes they might not have even really wanted to succeed, but they end up succeeding. And once that's done, it can't be undone. So that's where I'm going to leave you today. And I hope that helped you think a little bit more about why you do what you do. Please like and share so we can spread this educational program around the world. If you want to help me, subscribe to my YouTube channel. If you want to help me even more, go on my Patreon page and become a patron. So that's all for now. Until next time.